The battle against net zero is reaching a crescendo because the membership of the Liberal National Party is finally asserting itself in this supposedly grassroots organisation. And we are watching as state after state around Australia, the membership of each state's Liberal National Party is voting now to reject net zero. Victoria is just the latest example and completes the set of mainland states who have all now voted to reject net zero from their state-level policy platforms. Only Tasmania remains, and it is most likely only a matter of time before their members also have their say and most probably say the same thing. But that's the members at a state level. And unfortunately, despite the Liberal Party insisting that it is a grassroots organisation, at least at a federal level, it has proved itself to be anything but. So whilst it is very encouraging to see the state membership exerting their influence over state-level policies, it is going to be a battle to get that to flow through to the federal Liberal Party under Susan Lee. As I covered in the video when Susan Lee became the leader of the Liberal Party, Susan Lee is a swamp creature. She's had a hand in all of their worst policy decisions over the last 20 years, from the disaster that is the Murray-Darling Basin Plan that I first covered back in 2011 with all of the economic and environmental vandalism that has flowed out of that policy, right through to net zero today and all of the economic and environmental vandalism that is flowing from that policy. Susan Lee and net zero are a package deal. And she will fight for net zero like her political life depends on it, because it does. For the last 20 years, Susan Lee has ridden a tide of ever-increasing government micromanagement, regulation, intrusion, wokeness, and the Liberal Party's continual drift to the political left. And that's been an easy ride for her until now. Because thanks to the cost of living biting hard, the Liberal Party membership are now getting fed up with being ignored. Andrew Hastie MP, long thought of as a future Liberal Party leader, is now sniffing an opportunity for himself, and the tides of history are changing thanks largely to the example being set by Donald Trump in the USA. Put it all together, and Susan Lee is suddenly caught in a storm that I believe she is ill-equipped to handle. Now, if you've ever heard me talk about the realities of political parties, you will have heard me say that if you think the politics between the parties is bad, wait till you see what it's like within the parties. The politics is absolutely savage, and there are no exceptions. It happens in every single political party. Unfortunately, it just seems to be a function of human nature. And Susan Lee now finds herself tottering atop a throne built out of dominoes, and all it will take is for one of those dominoes to fall, and her nascent party leadership will be over, as others within her own party gleefully tear her down. And in my opinion, that's not a bad thing, because Susan Lee has become, partly through her own actions and also partly just through circumstance, the emblem of everything that is wrong with the Liberal Party of Australia today. And increasingly, the party itself is waking up to the fact that it cannot rebuild until she is removed. My name's Topher. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to cut through the crap and make sense of the nonsense that surrounds us. Now, I am 100% viewer supported, and I really appreciate everyone who's bought me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net. And if you like my videos, you will love my books as well, my DVDs and my merch, which you'll find at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Now, Susan Lee was supposed to be the fresh face that could make a break from the Liberal Party's troubled recent past under Scott Morrison and lead them out of the electoral wilderness after their recent shellacking at the last federal election under Peter Dutton. Trouble is, she's leading them all right, but in exactly the wrong direction. The latest news poll shows just 27% primary vote support for the Liberal Party. That is their worst poll in news poll history, and there's no evidence that Susan has the kind of vision for Australia, nor the kind of cut-through with the electorate to turn that around. But this was entirely predictable, and I can say that because I predicted it. Because whilst Susan presents herself as an alternative, she is in reality the swampiest of the remaining swamp creatures. Now, I'm sorry to repeat some of what I covered in a previous video about Susan Lee, but it's important that people understand. Susan Lee was challenged by her own Liberal Party membership in her own seat back in early 2022. Her own party membership of her own branch wanted to get rid of her, and with good reason. She was one of the MPs who was then saved by Scott Morrison's infamous captain's picks, which Morrison claimed was about protecting women, but as I discussed in my previous video, a majority of the MPs he protected were actually men. This was actually about protecting the swamp, this melee of senior Liberals who all had each other's backs, at least at that time, and were pursuing political gain at the expense of their members, at the expense of the voting Australian public. And when the members tried to reassert themselves and choose who their representative would be instead of Susan, the swamp stepped in, and Prime Minister Scott Morrison succeeded at the time in protecting Susan Lee. But as is so often the case, he won the battle and lost the war. He further alienated his own party membership and voters, and he put the lie to this claim that the Liberal Party is a grassroots organisation, and he laid the groundwork for the electoral annihilation that they suffered at the very next election. And then again, they suffered an even worse annihilation at the following election under Peter Dutton, and now things are looking even worse under Susan Lee. The problem with the Liberal Party isn't that they have the wrong face at the top. It's that they've become completely disconnected from their membership at the bottom. And nowhere is this more clear than on the topic of net zero, which is now being nearly unanimously rejected by their members at that grassroots state level. And yet it's still being championed by their leaders at the top of the federal party. The Liberal Party have made efforts to actually remove any of their MPs who questioned net zero. The specifics of the politicking and how it happened in each case has been different, but over the years they've successfully removed Craig Kelly, Jared Rennick, George Christensen, Erica Betts, and doubtless a bunch more that I've missed. And the skeptics who remain inside the party, such as Senator Alex Antic in South Australia, well, they've managed to remain because of their own clever political manoeuvring and the staunch support they have from their party base within their own seat, the grassroots support. And they've survived despite the best efforts of the party leadership to eliminate them. The battle over net zero is a war between the Liberal Party membership and the Liberal Party leadership, the big wigs versus the grassroots. And what we're witnessing now is the backlash against power brokers who thought that they knew better, who decided to support the policies that they thought would be good for their careers instead of supporting the policies that are actually believed in and supported by their members. And now, with these latest polling numbers confirming what we already knew, that Susan Lee is unelectable because she isn't part of the solution, she's actually part of the problem. And with the Liberal National Coalition at a federal level currently on a break, with the Nationals teetering on the brink of actual sanity regarding net zero, with party leader David Littleproud, long a supporter of net zero, now being much more careful in his language, having only narrowly survived a leadership challenge within the Nationals, and with Nationals party heavyweights Barnaby Joyce and Senator Matt Canavan on an anti-net zero warpath, and finally, with the Liberal memberships nationwide overwhelmingly rejecting net zero as a policy platform, it's becoming nearly impossible to see how the Liberal Party could possibly rebuild without first scrapping net zero and scrapping Susan Lee in the process. And right on cue, just the other night, Andrew Hastie MP, long believed to be a future party leader and presumptive future Prime Minister, went on ABC radio and nailed his colours to the mast, threatening to quit the front bench of the party if they don't dump net zero. Now, him quitting from the front bench would sound like a good thing for Susan Lee. It's kind of one less threat, one less troublemaker in her shadow cabinet. But actually, the backbench places him where he needs to be to speak out and to launch a leadership challenge. And that act of sacrifice, stepping down from the front bench, would make him the rallying point for everyone else who is also opposed to net zero within the Liberal Party. So it looks like net zero's days inside the Liberal Party are numbered. The question is, will Susan Lee choose to do this the easy way, or will she do it the hard way? The civil war that was being played out behind closed doors inside the party room and inside branch meetings is increasingly playing out in public, and that's a good thing in my view, because the end of net zero cannot come soon enough. We know that the world is still increasing its CO2 emissions so fast that what Australia does is barely a rounding error. And we know, because we can see it in our power bills, that the promise of net zero bringing our power bills down was just a fantasy. Net zero in Australia is all pain and no gain, And that's true actually in the rest of the world. China, India, Africa, and now thanks to the election of Donald Trump, the USA, they're all increasing their CO2 emissions way faster than we could possibly decrease ours. The numbers are astronomical, and they are focusing on cheap, reliable power above all else. And that is exactly what Andrew Hastie has now promised he will do should he end up leading the Australian Liberal Party. And I know at times it feels like Australia is being left behind these other countries, like we're stuck with our lot. But actually the status quo is far more fragile than most people realise. And with this latest polling disaster for Susan Lee, I believe it is now only a matter of time before the Liberal Party is forced by their own membership and by brutal reality to reject net zero and pivot completely away from their policies of the last 20 years with all of the economic and environmental vandalism that they've inflicted over the last few decades. And the Liberal Party is being forced to get back to the business of representing the will of their members. One final note. This is why it is so important for Australians to get involved in politics, even at that grassroots base level. People always come to me and they ask, should I become a member of a major party or a minor party? And my answer is always the same. I say, yes. Because if you're asking me that question, then you're not a member of any. And that's the problem. Just pick one and get involved. The only reason swamp creatures like Susan Lee and Scott Morrison and all the rest are able to dominate the swamp is because there's not enough ordinary Australians at a grassroots level draining their swamp, holding them to account, watching, observing what they do. If you're disgusted by politics, and frankly you should be, don't use that disgust as an excuse to stay out of it. That disgust should be your reason to get involved, become a member, have your say. Because as Plato said nearly 2,500 years ago, the price men pay for indifference to public affairs is to be ruled by evil men. Now, in these enlightened times, we can change the word men to people, but the point still stands. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Here in Australia, the hour is later than we think, but also change is more possible, more achievable, and sometimes faster than you think. And thanks to the good men and women inside the Liberal Party, of which there are a few, and thanks to the efforts of the membership at a grassroots level, we might be just about to see an end to net zero madness in the Liberal Party. And if that happens, then we might be about to see a historic change in the direction of Australia. My name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us. You can support my work and help me to keep the Topher Project going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net. And if you like my videos, then do yourself a favor and grab yourself a copy of my books, my DVDs, and my t-shirts, a range of different designs. Some are funny, like "Don't make me repeat myself," which is a quote from history saying, "Don't make me repeat myself." Some are thought-provoking, like my original Good People Break Bad Laws design. All are designed to be conversation starters, like my Net Zero design, which is my way of saying no to net zero. And everything you buy will help me to keep the Topher Project going. Thank you for watching to the end. I really appreciate it because it helps me with the algorithm. Please be sure to like, leave a comment, make sure you've subscribed to the channel, maybe check out this video that YouTube thinks that you will like as well. And as always, think free.